Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are wrestling with a word that feels like it should be the simplest thing in the world.
It's the one word everyone agrees on.
Freedom.
Right. Until you ask them what it means. And then the fight starts.
And that is exactly what we're unpacking today. We're zooming in on a specific moment, 1865, and the few decades right after. The Civil War is over, the smoke is clearing.
The chains are physically off.
But suddenly you have millions of people realizing that not being a slave isn't quite the same thing as being free.
You know, it's a moment of total definition collapse. The old order is gone. And now you have the South in ruins, the North just exploding with this new industrial power, and the West being carved up.
And everyone is shouting their version of what America is supposed to be. And we aren't just going to talk about this in the abstract. We have a serious stack of primary sources today.
We do. We've got private diaries, labor contracts,
speeches from Native American chiefs, the philosophies of the richest men in history. We're going to hear the voices of a fractured America.
And I think what's so shocking is how they reveal that freedom wasn't just a political battle. It was an economic one. It was a battle over time, over land, and really over the right to exist.
That's the mission. To look past the textbook dates and see the messy human reality of how modern America was actually built. So, let's get into it.
Where should we start?
We have to start in the South. It's early 1865. The Confederacy is crumbling. And if you look at the history books, this is the moment of liberation. But we have a diary here from a man named Henry William Ravenel.
A botanist, a plantation owner in South Carolina.
And reading this, he doesn't sound like a man who's been liberated.
No, he sounds like a man watching the apocalypse. You have to get inside his mindset. To us, the end of slavery is a moral triumph. To him, it was, and I'm quoting here, chaos and disorder.
He actually writes that the whole plantation system had divine sanction. That really stopped me. He's not just saying it was profitable, he's saying it was a God's plan.
That's the crucial insight. He writes that the master-slave relationship was the best condition in which the two races could live together. So when that's gone, he doesn't just see a lost war.
He sees a violation of the natural order.
He's psychologically unmoored. Totally.
And you can feel the panic in his writing. He asks this very practical, anxious question. Will the freedman work without necessity?
Nothing but necessity will compel him to labor. That's the line. He literally cannot imagine a world where black people work for wages or for ambition or for their own future.
He just assumes the only reason anyone works is because they're forced to.
Right. He's terrified that without the whip, the entire economy will just grind to a halt.
It's fear, but it's also this deep resentment. And if Ravenel is anxious, the next guy in our stack is just furious. We have a letter from Edward Barnell Hayward, another planter, from January 1866.
Hayward is in a much darker place. He's writing to a friend up north, and the tone is just dripping with venom. He calls the South a lost country.
There's this line where he says, "I obey like a subject, but I cannot love such a government." It's like he's describing living under a foreign occupation.
To him, he was. He's angry at the Yankee speculators coming down to buy up cheap land. But his biggest fear is about power.
He predicts that if the North insists on equality, on giving freedmen the right to vote, it's going to lead to a race war.
He actually uses the word extermination.
He does.
He thinks the push for equality will result in the extermination of one race or the other. It shows you how high the stakes were in their minds. They thought equality was literally fatal to their society.
So while these elites are writing diaries and predicting the end of the world, formerly enslaved people are just trying to figure out how to survive. Which brings us to one of the most cynical documents in our stack.
The sharecropping contract.
This one's from Shelby County, Tennessee, 1866. Now, I've heard the term sharecropping a million times. It's just a vocabulary word. But reading the actual contract.
Wow, the devil is really in the details, isn't it?
It is. This document explains how the South tried to put the genie back in the bottle.
Okay, so let's break down the deal. On the surface, it doesn't look like slavery. The landowner, Thomas J. Ross, he has the land, the mules, the seed.
And the freedmen provide the labor. The contract says Ross pays them 1/2 of all the cotton, corn, and wheat. Honestly, a 50-50 split. It sounds like a partnership.
And that's exactly how they sold it. You keep half of what you grow. It sounds fair. But you have to do the math of poverty. These families are starting with zero. Nothing.
So how do they eat while the cotton is growing? You can't eat cotton.
Right. And here's the catch. I see this clause here about furnishing.
It says Ross will furnish them with supplies.
Exactly. He sells them food, medicine, clothing, all from his own store, on credit. And the prices at the company store were, usually inflated.
So every day they work, their debt to Ross gets bigger.
So by the time the harvest comes in months later, Ross tallies up the debt. He deducts the cost of the food, the tools, everything from their 50% share.
And somehow, year after year, the debt often equaled or even exceeded the value of their crop,
So they end the year with nothing. Or worse, they end the year owing him money.
which means they can't leave.
They have to sign another contract for the next year to pay off the debt. It's a debt spiral. But look at the behavioral clauses. This is where it stops looking like a business deal.
Yeah, this part is chilling. We furthermore bind ourselves that we will obey the orders of said Ross in all things. And this, docked for disobedience.
Docked for disobedience. I mean, think about that power dynamic. If Ross decides you gave him a dirty look, he cuts your pay. If you take a break, he doesn't approve of.
He cuts your pay, they're bound to work 10 hours a day. It is a system designed to extract labor without granting any autonomy.
The most heartbreaking part for me is the signatures at the bottom.
The X marks.
Yeah. Samuel X. Johnson, Thomas X. Richard.
These are men binding themselves and their families to a legal document that strips away their freedom, and they likely couldn't even read the words on the page.
It just visualizes the tragedy of Reconstruction perfectly. You have freedom on paper. They're signing a contract. They're not on an auction block. But without education, without capital, that freedom is an illusion. They're trapped.
So while the South is stuck in this muddy agricultural trap, trying to recreate the past, the North is doing something completely different.
It is rocketing into the future.
This is the beginning of the Gilded Age, the explosion of industry.
Railroads, steel, oil. We have to talk about the men running the show. Carnegie, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt. But we have a bit of a historical cage match in our sources here.
We do. Two historians looking at the exact same men and seeing two completely different things.
It's the classic debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Robber barons versus captains of industry, and the timing of these sources is really important. First up, we have Matthew Josephson writing in 1934.
1934, so the depths of the Great Depression.
Exactly. Capitalism had crashed. People were starving. So when Josephson looks back at these tycoons, he doesn't see heroes. He sees feudal barons.
He calls them aggressive, lawless men who acted without those established moral principles.
He basically paints them as gangsters in top hats. Says they treated the country's resources like their own personal loot.
But even Josephson, as critical as he is, he admits something interesting.
He does. He says that under their control, production became more efficient. He admits they organized the chaos of early America. But to him, the cost, the corruption, crushing competitors, it was just too high.
Okay, so that's the prosecution. Then we jump forward to 1999, the dot-com boom.
Right. Everyone's making money. And we have historian H.W. Brands. And his take is totally different.
He argues that what set these men apart wasn't their ruthlessness, it was their vision. He calls them captains of industry.
He uses this phrase, reciprocal advantage.
Which sounds a bit like corporate speak. What does he mean by that?
It's the idea that self-interest can actually help everyone. He argues, sure, Rockefeller got insanely rich, but in the process, he also made kerosene so cheap that a working-class family could finally light their home at night.
So Brandt's point is that they didn't force anyone to buy their product. They just did it better and cheaper.
Exactly. So Josephson sees predators who stole from the public. Brands sees architects who built American power.
And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
The sources suggest they were both. Visionaries who built the modern world, and also ruthless monopolists who crushed anyone in their way. They created the system we live in, for better and for worse.
But here's the thing that gets me. These guys, Carnegie, Rockefeller, they knew they were crushing people. They saw the poverty. How did they sleep at night?
They needed a story, a philosophy that explained why it was okay for them to have so much while others had so little.
And they found it. Social Darwinism. We have a text here from William Graham Sumner, written in 1880, and this guy does not pull his punches.
No, he does not.
I've heard the term social Darwinism, but reading Sumner, it's cooler than I expected. He basically takes Darwin's survival of the fittest in nature and just applies it directly to the economy.
It's a massive leap of logic. He argues that nature is entirely neutral. It rewards those who are fit, hardworking, smart, capable, and it punishes those who aren't.
So if you're poor, in Sumner's view, it's not because the system is rigged, it's because you are biologically failing.
Essentially, yes. He calls poverty the survival of the unfittest, and this defines his idea of freedom. For Sumner, liberty means the government stays completely out of the way.
So if the government taxes the rich to help the poor, he thinks that's actually immoral.
Because it's messing with nature. He says it's overturning the laws of nature to help those who have failed. It's a philosophy of extreme negative liberty. Sink or swim.
That is bleak. But then we have the big man himself, Andrew Carnegie. We have his famous essay, The Gospel of Wealth, from 1889. Now, Carnegie was a social Darwinist too, wasn't he?
He was, but he sounds different. Carnegie is fascinating because he seems to have a guilty conscience. He admits the gap between rich and poor is a problem. He says the ties of brotherhood are snapping.
But, and this is a big but, he doesn't believe in paying higher wages.
No, that's the paradox. He admits the workers are struggling, but he won't give them a raise.
Why?
He thinks they can't be trusted with it. He kind of implies that if you give a worker more money, he'll just waste it. Carnegie believes the man of wealth has a superior wisdom. He sees the millionaire as a trustee for the poor.
A trustee. So I'll keep the money because I know how to spend it better than you do.
Precisely. But he draws this hard line between alms and ladders. He hates alms, charity, handouts. He thinks that just keeps people weak. He wants to build ladders.
Ladders being libraries.
Libraries, universities, parks, concert halls, places where an aspiring fit person can go to improve themselves. He's saying, I won't carry you, but I'll build the ladder so you can climb up yourself.
There is one part of his writing that really surprised me, though. For a guy who loved making money, he really hated the idea of inheritance.
It's the most radical part of his argument. He supports a heavy death tax. He says that the man who dies rich dies disgraced. He hates the selfish millionaire who just hoards cash and leaves it to his kids.
So his version of freedom is, you have the freedom to get as rich as you can, as ruthlessly as you can.
But you have a moral duty to give it all away before you die. But strictly on your own terms. That's the key. It's still about control.
Okay, so we have the wealthy justifying their power, but there were millions of people looking at this system and saying, this isn't freedom, this is a trap. And we have two voices of resistance in our stack that are just so powerful.
One from the factory floor and one from the American West. Let's start with Ira Stewart, a labor leader, a machinist. In 1879, he wrote A Second Declaration of Independence.
I love that title. He's basically saying the first one didn't finish the job.
He absolutely is. Stewart flips the whole conversation. He says the problem isn't just legal slavery anymore, it's wealth versus poverty. He has this profound insight. Slavery is the child of poverty.
Wow. Slavery is the child of poverty. What does he mean by that?
Well, he means that if you're working 12 or 14 hours a day just to buy bread, you are not free. You might have the right to vote, but do you have the time to read a newspaper?
Do you have the energy to be a citizen?
No. You are a slave to your basic needs. So for Stewart, freedom isn't about contracts or markets. It's about time.
Exactly. He's the guy pushing for the 8-hour workday. He argues that leisure is the prerequisite for liberty. You need time to be a human being, to think. If the factory owns all your waking hours, then the factory owns you.
So we've got the sharecropper controlled by debt, the factory worker controlled by the clock.
And then we have the voice that just breaks my heart every time I read it, Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce.
This speech, 1879, he's in Washington, D.C., speaking to Congress, and the context is just devastating. His people have been chased, killed, and finally forced onto a reservation.
And the policy at the time was Americanization, right? Forcing assimilation.
Yes. The government wanted to force Native Americans to cut their hair, wear suits, become farmers. And they enforced this through confinement. They put them on reservations and said, stay here.
So Chief Joseph stands up, and he doesn't ask for money. He doesn't ask for an 8-hour day. He uses the language of natural law. He says, all men were made by the same Great Spirit, Chief.
It sounds just like the Declaration of Independence. But his request is so simple, and yet it was being completely denied.
He says, let me be a free man, free to travel, free to stop, free to work, free to trade, free to think and talk and act for myself.
Free to travel. That really stuck out to me because at that exact moment, the captains of industry, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, were celebrating their ability to move things.
They were building railroads to move steel and oil across the continent. Money could go anywhere.
That's the ultimate irony of the Gilded Age. Capital had total freedom of movement. A dollar could travel from New York to San Francisco in a second by telegraph. But a human being, a Nez Perce chief, he was locked in a cage.
He's pointing out the hypocrisy at the heart of the whole American experiment.
He's saying freedom isn't something the government gives you like one of Carnegie's ladders. It's something you were born with.
He says, the earth is the mother of all people, and all people should have equal rights upon it. He's arguing for a freedom that predates the Constitution and predates the economy.
And the tragedy is, he was speaking to a room full of men who were too busy building an empire to listen.
It's heavy stuff. When you try to pull all these threads together, you realize that 1865 wasn't just a restart button. It was the start of a fight that, we're arguably still in.
Absolutely. Look at the definitions we've covered. For the sharecropper, freedom was a contract they couldn't read that kept them in debt.
For the industrialist, freedom was the right to dominate the market and keep the government out.
For the labor leader, freedom was time, the 8-hour day. And for Chief Joseph, it was the right to simply exist and move across the land.
And the dominant definition, the one that won out in this era, was the economic one, the one from Sumner and Carnegie, the freedom to build wealth.
That drove the American rise to power. But the cost.
The cost was the autonomy of the people at the bottom, the X on the contract, the reservation border, the 12-hour shift.
It really makes you rethink the Gilded Age. We look back and see the mansions and the railroads, the greatest economy the world had ever seen.
But reading these documents, you realize that for a lot of people, the land of the free felt a lot like a trap.
It leaves us with a question we are still grappling with today. Does economic power equate to freedom? Sumner said yes, you earn your freedom. Stewart said yes, you need wealth to buy your freedom.
But Chief Joseph suggested freedom is something inherent, something that systems can only take away, never actually give.
That is the thought I want to leave you with. In the rush to build a modern America, did we decide that freedom was something you buy rather than something you simply are?
That's the big question.
It is.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.